The bridge had been gone for years, but the dog still came. Every morning, before the light was fully awake, he made his way down the narrow path through the reeds, following a route that no longer led anywhere. His paws left shallow impressions in the damp soil, soft at the edges, already fading before he could turn back to see them. The air was heavy that morning, not with mist, but with memory, the kind of stillness that seemed to hold its breath around him, as if the land itself didn't want to make a sound. He reached the clearing where the bridge had once stood. Only the stone supports remained, two broken pillars rising from the riverbed like bones, their surfaces blackened and cracked. Between them stretched nothing but dry sand, rough and pale, where water used to move. The dog stopped at the edge. His coat was the color of smoke, a mixture of ash and dust. His ears hung low, twitching once at the faint sound of air brushing through the tall grass. He lowered his head and sniffed the ground. The scent was old. Fire, wood, time. There was no river smell anymore. He stepped closer to the edge, claws scraping lightly against the stone. The drop below was shallow now, filled with stones that gleamed faintly from a rain that had never reached them. The earth here still remembered the shape of water, but nothing moved within it. The dog sat down, tail curling around his legs, his eyes fixed on the space between the pillars. He waited. For a long time, nothing changed. Then, somewhere beyond the far bank, a sound. Faint, hollow, uncertain. A single creak, like wood bending under weight. The dog's head lifted, his ears perked forward. The sound came again, softer now, echoing once before fading. He stood. The far bank was overgrown, reeds and dry willows, tangled and brittle. The remains of the bridge lay half buried there, timbers blackened and warped. He took one step forward, testing the ground, then another. The earth crumbled slightly under his weight, releasing a faint puff of dust. He stopped at the edge. The air was warmer here, as if the soil itself still held the ghost of fire. He looked down. In the cracks between stones, a thin line of dampness shimmered faintly, catching what little light there was. Not water, not yet, but something close enough to make the ground glisten. He sniffed once more. The scent was strange, not of river or rain, but of iron. He stepped back, uneasy. His nails scratched against the stone, making a small sound that disappeared almost instantly into the still air. Behind him, the wind tried to move, a faint stirring, like breath against the grass, but it died before it could reach him. The dog lay down, his head resting on his paws, eyes still fixed on the empty space where the bridge had been. He remembered, though he did not know why, the way the water had once moved, the sound of footsteps above, the smell of wet wood and the hum of rain on the planks. It wasn't memory the way people remembered things. It was something older, quieter, a feeling that had learned to stay. The light changed slowly, the sun hiding behind thin clouds. The charred stones caught the gray light and seemed to breathe it back. The dog didn't move. Hours passed. Shadows stretched. The air thickened again. Then, a faint vibration. He lifted his head. It came from the ground, soft, rhythmic, like footsteps traveling through the earth itself. He stood, ears high, eyes searching the far bank. The sound grew stronger, then faded again, leaving only silence. The dog took a cautious step forward, peering across the dry riverbed. The wind stirred once more, moving just enough to shift the ashes near the pillars. For a moment, it sounded like water. He watched the space where the current should have been, eyes fixed, breath still. But nothing came. Only the dust moved, rising in slow curls before settling again. The sound of water faded into memory, leaving only the smell of burned wood and the distant echo of something that might have once been rain. The dog sat again, eyes half closed, the faint hum of the world returning to its quiet rhythm. He waited. The bridge did not return. The river did not speak. But as the evening light dimmed, the wind came once more, and though it carried no sound, it bent the grass along the bank, in a shape that almost looked like the memory of a current. The second day began without warning. There was no sunrise, only a slow brightening of the gray that had hung over the valley for as long as anyone could remember. The light felt tired, the kind that arrived late and left early. The dog woke before it came. He had slept curled against one of the bridge's broken supports, the stone cold against his ribs. When he stood, a small cloud of ash drifted off his fur, carried nowhere by the still air. His paws left shallow impressions in the dust, each one gone before the next was made. The riverbed below remained dry. The sand was cracked in long, patient lines that curved and met like old handwriting. Every so often, a faint sound came from beneath it, the slow settling of the earth, or maybe something moving far below. The dog stretched, his spine arching, and looked toward the far bank. Nothing had changed. The same tangle of reeds and willows stood in silence, their branches thin as ribs. The burned remains of the bridge reached partway across the gap before stopping, charred timbers jutting out like blackened fingers, pointing toward something they'd never touch again. The dog sniffed the air. It smelled of iron and dust. No scent of rain, no promise of it. He padded closer to the edge and looked down. The shallow cracks in the dried riverbed were darker now, as if the earth had been sweating through its skin. In one of them, faintly, something glimmered, a thin, trembling reflection of the sky. He lowered his head to sniff again. The smell was faintly metallic, like wet stone, but there was no moisture when his tongue brushed the ground. Only dust. He sat back and waited. Time passed slowly in this place. The light never seemed to change much. Only the shadows lengthened slightly, leaning toward the west before disappearing altogether. Then, a sound. A single echo. Low, hollow, drifting from the far side of the ruins. The dog's ears perked. His head lifted sharply, eyes fixed on the place where the sound had come from. It came again, softer, broken by distance. He stood, his body tense. The wind wasn't moving, and yet something had shifted. The grass on the far side of the dry river bent slightly, as if something unseen had brushed through it. He stepped forward until his front paws touched the very edge of the drop. The sound returned clearer this time, a slow creaking, wood against stone. The bridge. He knew that sound. He leaned forward, ears straining, eyes searching the far shadows. For a moment he thought he saw it, the faint outline of planks stretching between the pillars, the soft flicker of movement across them. Then it was gone. Only the pillars remained, silent, blackened, unyielding. The dog backed away, lowering his head. His breathing quickened once, then slowed again. The air had changed. It was thicker now, humming faintly, as though the earth itself was remembering something it couldn't name. The dog turned toward the slope that led down to the riverbed. His paws slid slightly in the loose sand as he descended, leaving faint trails behind him. The heat from the ground seeped through his pads, not warm enough to burn, but wrong, unnatural. At the base, the air smelled stronger, dust and metal, the ghost of rain. He walked slowly between the stones, his nails tapping softly. When he reached the center, he stopped. The cracks that had been faint yesterday were deeper now. The glimmering reflection from before had widened into a thin ribbon of silver, running along the center of the bed like a scar. He lowered his head to it. It wasn't water. It didn't move. But it shimmered, a perfect reflection of the sky above, except the sky in it was darker, heavier, full of shapes that didn't exist overhead. The dog took a step back, ears flat. His tail twitched once. The light in the reflection shifted just slightly, as if something on the other side had moved closer. Then came the sound again, creaking, slow, measured. The bridge. He looked up. The pillars hadn't changed, but for one brief heartbeat, the air between them rippled, faintly like heat over asphalt, and then went still. The sound faded, the reflection dimmed. The ground went quiet again. The dog stayed there, motionless, staring at the space where the shimmer had been. He didn't move for a long time. Not until the light began to fade again, not until the cold returned. When he climbed back to the top, his paws left no marks in the sand. He lay down beside the stone pillar once more, head resting against his front legs, eyes half open. The bridge was gone. The riverbed below had already begun to forget. But deep in the cracks, unseen and unheard, a single drop of something dark and bright gathered. Not rain, not water, just a memory of what it used to be. And somewhere in the distance, too faint to be real, came the sound of one last ripple, moving through a river that no longer existed. The third day began with a strange kind of warmth, not sunlight, but something deeper, rising from the ground itself. The air over the riverbed shimmered faintly, as though the earth had started breathing again. But it wasn't alive. It was remembering. The dog woke slowly. He'd slept beneath one of the stone supports again, the side that caught the least wind. His fur was matted with ash and dew, and when he shook himself, the sound was small, a dry rustle swallowed by the valley. He stood and looked down at the riverbed. The cracks had widened. The glimmer that had stretched across it the day before was brighter now, a thin silver thread winding through the dust, following the old shape of the current. It looked like water, but it wasn't. The dog stepped carefully down the slope, paws sliding in the loose dirt. His nails clicked faintly against stone. The sound echoed once, then faded, lost somewhere in the hollow of the valley. When he reached the center, the air was warmer. The smell of iron was stronger, too, sharp and faintly sweet, the way old rain smells after it's been gone too long. He lowered his head. The silver line pulsed faintly, once, as if aware of him. He blinked. It pulsed again. The sound followed. Low, deep, more felt than heard. A hum, the same one that had haunted the air since the fire. It rose through the ground into his legs, through his ribs, until it filled the space behind his eyes. He stepped back, ears flat. The hum grew stronger. The dust around him began to shift, tiny grains rolling together as if drawn toward the crack. Then, a flash. Not light, not color, but movement. A shimmer that passed through the air, quick and thin, like a shadow of something enormous, moving beneath the surface. The dog froze. The hum stopped. The air went dead again. He stayed there for a long time, muscles tight, listening. Nothing. Only the faint hiss of dust settling. He turned toward the bridge, or what was left of it. The pillars loomed above, black against the pale sky. Between them, the air shimmered faintly again, the same as it had the night before, the same illusion of planks where there were none. For a moment, the dog thought he saw movement there, a flicker, the suggestion of a shadow crossing from one side to the other. It was gone almost before he could focus. He climbed back up the bank, claws scraping against the dry stone. At the top, he stopped beside the broken edge where the bridge had once met the land. The charred wood still smelled faintly of smoke when the sun hit it. He sniffed once, then lowered his head to the ground. The scent beneath the ash was familiar. Faint traces of oil, rope, old wood, and beneath that, faintly, water. Not real water, not anymore, but the ghost of it. He sat down again. The sound returned, faint at first, like a voice speaking through distance. The hum rose and fell in rhythm, almost steady. He turned his head toward the far bank. A shape stood there. For a moment it looked like a man, tall, thin, unmoving. But the longer the dog stared, the less certain he became. The edges of it flickered slightly, like smoke caught in light. Then it shifted. Not walked, not turned, just shifted, as though the air had moved around it. The dog stood. His tail hung low, stiff. His body leaned forward slightly, muscles trembling with attention. The shape stayed still. Then, the hum grew louder, enough to make the dust at the dog's paws tremble. The air between the pillars rippled again, wider this time. The dog barked once. The sound was sharp, cutting through the valley, but it came back wrong. The echo didn't return the way sound should. It stretched, slowed, warped, until it sounded more like a cry than a call. The shape on the far bank tilted its head. Then it was gone. The air went still. The hum stopped. The dog backed away from the edge, tail between his legs. The light had changed. Dimmer now, yellow-gray, like dusk arriving early. He lay down beside the stone pillar, his chest rising and falling quickly. The warmth that had come from the earth was fading again. The ground beneath him felt hollow, thin, as if the valley were empty all the way through. For a long time, he didn't move. Then, faintly, from somewhere below, the sound of dripping. He lifted his head. It came again. Slow, uneven, like drops falling into water far underground. He listened, eyes wide, until it stopped. When he looked down into the riverbed again, the silver line was gone. The ground had dried, cracked wider, but the smell of water was still there. He rested his head on his paws again, staring across the emptiness. The burned bridge cut the sky in half, its broken beams pointing toward nothing. The sound of dripping never returned. But as the last of the light faded, something below the surface shimmered once, a faint reflection, a ripple without water, and was gone before the dog could blink. The fourth morning came quietly, though the world beneath it no longer felt still. The air held a weight to it now, as if the valley itself was straining to remember how to breathe. The sky had lost its shape, no clouds, no color, just a pale glow that pressed down on the hills until everything looked the same shade of gray. The dog was awake before dawn. He hadn't really slept. He only rested his head against the cold stone and watched the horizon refuse to change. When he stood, the sound of his claws against the rock was the only movement in the silence. He looked down at the riverbed. It had changed again. Where there had once been cracks and dust, now faint streaks of darkness ran through the earth like veins. They didn't move, not quite, but something about them shimmered, a soft, uncertain glint that caught the light and let it go. The dog descended slowly down the slope. The ground felt warmer now, too soft beneath his paws. When he reached the bottom, he stopped. The air was damp here, faintly metallic, the smell of rain that would never fall. He tilted his head. A sound drifted from the far end of the valley. Not the hum this time, something sharper. A scrape, followed by the dull clatter of stone against stone. He waited, body tense, ears high. The sound stopped. Then, a second scrape, closer now. The dog turned toward the far bank. The reeds there were still, but the space behind them looked different, the color deeper, like a shadow had thickened and chosen to stay. He took one slow step backward. The sand beneath his paws gave slightly sinking. A faint pulse traveled through the ground. Once, then again. The hum returned, low and deep, the same sound that had haunted the bridge since the fire. But it was different now, slower, heavier, vibrating through the bones instead of the air. The dog froze. The sound rolled through the valley like a heartbeat buried beneath miles of soil. The burned pillars trembled faintly, a dusting of ash falling from their edges. Then, from between them, the shimmer. Thin at first, almost invisible, like the light bending in heat. Then thicker, a ripple spreading across the empty gap where the bridge had once been. The dog stepped forward, muscles stiff, eyes locked on the air above the dry bed. The shimmer grew stronger, until for an instant it looked like water again, suspended in air, faintly blue, almost alive. He barked once. The sound echoed strangely the way it had before, stretched, distant, distorted. The shimmer wavered. Then the hum stopped. The air fell silent so completely it felt wrong. The shimmer lingered for a few heartbeats, then broke apart, dissolving into thin strands of light that fell and disappeared into the cracks below. The dog stayed where he was. He looked down. The dark streaks running through the riverbed were moving now, slow and steady, winding toward the pillars, like ink bleeding through paper. They met at the center, pooled, and then stopped. The smell of wet stone filled the air. He took another cautious step forward, then another, until he stood directly above it. The ground beneath his paws pulsed again, not violently, but enough to make the stones tremble. He lowered his head. The surface of the dark patch reflected something that wasn't the sky. It was too deep, too bright. The faint image of trees swaying, clouds moving, a reflection of the river as it had once been. The dog blinked and the image vanished. Only the cracked earth remained. He sat, breathing hard, watching the place where the reflection had been. The hum didn't return this time. The ground went quiet again, but the silence was no longer empty. It felt crowded, full of invisible things holding still. From somewhere behind him, the faint creak of wood. He turned. One of the blackened beams from the collapsed bridge had shifted. Slowly, it slid further down the bank, landing in the dust with a soft thud. The air stirred, just enough to move the ashes. For a moment, it sounded like water. The dog lifted his head, listening. His tail moved once, uncertainly. The illusion faded. Only the smell of old smoke remained. He turned back to the center of the riverbed. The dark patch was fading now, sinking deeper into the soil until nothing was left but a dull stain. He stood, walked back up the slope, and sat near the stone pillar. The sun, or whatever passed for it, had risen higher, though its light carried no warmth. The burned edges of the bridge glowed faintly in it, like embers that refused to die. He lay down again, resting his head on his paws, eyes fixed on the space where the shimmer had been. The ground beneath him was warm still, pulsing faintly, slow and steady. He breathed in. The air smelled like rain again. Then softly, almost too quiet to hear, a single drop fell. Not from the sky, from the pillar above him. It landed beside his paw, sank into the dust, and vanished without a trace. He watched it disappear, then closed his eyes. The hum did not return. The bridge did not speak. But in the hollow beneath the valley, far below where the fire had ended, something shifted once. A sound like the first ripple of water through stone, and then the earth went still again.